You are listening to episode 79 of The Secular Buddhist. Welcome to The Secular Buddhist. I'm Ted Meissner. The Secular Buddhist is the podcast and website for modern, secular application of early Buddhist thought. The podcast has interviews and roundtable discussions pertaining to engaged Buddhist training and practice, and the companion website has show notes for each episode, along with resource materials on Buddhism, critical thinking, science, secularism, and skeptical thought. Though the podcast focuses on core practice from a secular viewpoint, more traditional teachings are welcome and openly discussed. Jason Siff speaks with us about unlearning meditation in the second of a two-part episode. And today we are back again for part 2 of our interview with meditation teacher Jason Siff. Jason, thanks for being here again.
Thank you, Ted.
Today, what I'd like to cover is, again, to remind the audience, or if you're tuning in for the first time, we are discussing Jason's book, Unlearning Meditation, What to Do When Instructions Get in the Way. And in the previous episode, we covered part 1 and a good chunk of part 2. We got through impasses. And what I wanted to go through is talk a little bit about, maybe we should start with effortless calm and the advantage of drifting off before we go full tilt into the meditative processes.
Okay, sounds fine. Basically what I'm talking about in my book is that most meditators, when you start to get quiet and relaxed in your meditation sittings, that kind of relaxation may actually be a precursor to drifting off. And so if you're trying to maintain some kind of mindfulness or awareness of your breath, you may find that you keep trying to stop yourself from drifting. You try to wake yourself off with this notion that falling asleep is a problem in meditation, that you shouldn't do it, or it's not productive. And what I've seen in people's experiences around this is that if they allow themselves to drift in meditation, actually go towards sleep, they don't necessarily fall asleep. In fact, that relaxation, that the relaxed state that they're in, may actually, in a sense, transition into something that at first may be a bit heavier, a bit duller, and then go into something that could be a bit clearer. And often people will talk about seeing lights or pictures or hearing certain, phrases go through their head, or seeing scenes like movie clips. And this kind of phenomena may actually function as a way to just keep you a bit more awake and more interested while you go through that transition. And people may find that they start to actually wake up more. So in the book, I talk about this process as drifting off and waking up, that you're not just drifting off to fall asleep. That's not your intention meditation to sit and go to sleep. Your intention is basically to start to wake up, and that's what will happen if you allow this kind of drifting to occur. I mean, there are times, of course, you'll drop off to sleep or some state of mind that is like sleep. And I don't think that's a problem either. When you come out of it, if you just notice how you feel or recollect what that experience was like, if you can, you might get a sense if it was sleep or not, or even if it was, you have an idea of what sleep is like when you meditate. It's a good thing to know, because you will fall asleep during meditation sittings. It's inevitable.
It may happen now and then, yes.
Yeah.
Well, and I've noticed that, and in reading the book, I took that particular awareness because, as you had described, I often go in, and when I have that sense of drifting a bit, it's like, that's a bad thing, I'm not supposed to do that. Whack, bring the mind back. And changed that up a little bit and said, well, let's explore that, and followed what some of that guidance was in opening those doors that you provided, and found that was really very, very helpful, because I think this ties in a bit with the hypnagogic states you talk about in the book, mm-hmm. that this lent itself to a very peaceful state of calm, which actually fostered that mindfulness and that awareness of what was going on. So it was actually very helpful.
Yes. That's the people's experience. I've heard that countless times. And in the book, I do mention it in terms of allowing yourself to drift when you're in meditation is more like going into a hypnagogic state, like as you would before sleep. And it is a way for your mind to become absorbed on some of the lights, colors, or phrases, that you hear, and wake up with it. Whereas generally what people are taught with being aware of the breath or some other means of going into a calm state is much more hypnotic. You're actually following an object and there's a certain repetition in it, breath in and out, or you're counting it, or you're doing something which is actually a bit more of intentionally inducing a type of hypnotic state. The only difference may be between what the hypnotic states that you go into in meditation, doing it this way, and that you would do in hypnosis, is that you're probably not trying to change yourself through the state or implant suggestions. You're just using it to quiet your mind. So this kind of drifting, the nature of concentration, nature of focusing is one where the image or the light or the sound draws you in, and it can be any image or anything. It's not a prescribed one. And for some people, that's a bit unsettling. They're not too sure of what to do with that meditation because they may feel like they should be getting calm and absorbed and focused on particular images, as if you have the right image, you're going to have the right state of mind. And I don't think that's an adequate correlation.
Yeah, we hear that the nimitta will always look like this, and it will expand thus, and that's when you know you're in jhana. And
yeah,
maybe not always so.
No, it may not always be so. That and that's the thing, is that sometimes jhana gets taught to people as a particular color light or a particular image that's going to occur instead of any image or light that really draws you in, that takes your attention and holds it for even a few seconds.
Well, let's move to what I think is really a very strong point of your book. And for those of you who have it and are reading along at home, on page 140, they're specifically listed in a section where you're talking about your theory of meditative process. And you've broken those out into two main groups of three. Tell us a bit about the meditative process itself, and then let's go into the detail of what's in there.
Okay. I came up with this idea of the meditative process being not just one process, but many processes, is because there's so many different meditation practices that go at meditation from different angles, and these practices are often based on people's actual experiences of meditation. So instead of thinking that there's just one particular meditative process for everybody, to consider that there are different ones that you experience in your meditation practice, and that the meditative process that you're in is essentially the conditions that exist at any given time in your sitting and how you're relating to your experience. So the practice I teach, recollective awareness, starts with a receptive process, meaning when you sit down to meditate, what you're actually doing is you're allowing whatever comes up, whatever thoughts, feelings are present. You're allowing your mind to go different places. You're not trying to control it as much. Instead, you're being more receptive. And that kind of process, of course, at the beginning is not going to be perfect. You're going to find that you can't be absolutely receptive. You're actually going to be a bit resistant to certain things. You're not going to want to think about certain subjects, or you're not going to think too long about something, or have certain feelings or memories drive your experience. So what starts to happen with receptivity is that you actually notice more of what makes it hard to be receptive. And that's part of the whole process. And being receptive is different than just being in a flow or something like that. I'm actually talking about a process that someone would encounter who hasn't meditated before, who's just sitting down for the first time. It's getting lost in thought for periods of time is being receptive. If you allow it, if you relate to it as a problem, and you're trying to get rid of it, you're trying to stop yourself from thinking about certain things, then your process is probably more conflicted, which is another meditative process I mentioned. And a conflicted process is a process where we're struggling and at odds with our experience. We're actually trying to change things a bit, or we don't want to go into certain areas. And meditation practice often, or meditation instructions that we often receive, don't really, in a sense, treat a conflicted process as part of meditation, even though meditators are going through that quite a bit in their sittings.
Well, and
I believe it's very important, actually.
It is, and you speak about part of your development of this, and I think it shows most in the conflicted process when we go through that particular kind of experience in our meditation, that a lot of that can come up with, as it does particularly for me, as you put it, the meditation instructions you use, and your mind as it is. And we often have this idea that we are supposed to do the meditation thus, instead of allowing and just observing what is happening in the mind right now. And that seems to be fitting in with what you're describing about the conflicted process.
Right. That goes to the third process in this third basic one is a generative process, which is what most meditation instructions actually are. They're instructions to create a particular state of mind, to replace what it is you're experiencing with some other kind of experience, or instructions basically that involve more effort, more will to try to follow and create. And since you have a task to do, and so whenever you're in that kind of position, in your mind, your attention isn't kind of following along, it's not behaving well, you are going to be in conflict with the instructions you've received. And you are going to feel maybe a bit inadequate or frustrated, or that the practice isn't for you. And I've met many meditators over the years who've stuck with doing generative practices that they've been in conflict about. That what happens is they sit down and they immediately find themselves struggling. So part of the basis of this approach around recollective awareness is if you have sittings where you are trying to do a particular practice and struggling with it, to reflect back on that after the sitting and to try to understand a bit of how you're holding those instructions and maybe the rules that are found within those instructions, and get a much better sense of kind of what's going on that's making it a bit tense and tight and rigid.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And you transition, so that was the first triad of the two sections, the three basic meditative processes, receptive, generative, and conflicted, we just talked about. Now you start the next chapter in the book, not launching directly into the next three, the developed meditative practices, but you talk a bit about transition, the primary transition. Tell us about that as the segue into the developed meditative processes.
Okay. What I've seen in the reports of meditation students over the years is that our sittings are made up of transitions. You don't end the sitting in the same state of mind usually that you began it with, and there are shifts and changes going through the sitting, but usually when you sit down to meditate, you're going into the meditation sitting with something that's been going on in your mind before you sat down, and in a receptive type of process, you would allow those, a receptive practice actually, you would allow those thoughts and feelings into the sitting more, and trust that you will make a transition, that your mind will shift and quiet down. And that often does happen with allowing it. And this transition is just it's not like a definite line. It might be, just a period of time in the sitting where you actually feel like you're moving into what you notice as meditation. Into your attention starts to perhaps become a little bit better. You're a little more, you say, able to notice things about yourself or pick out what's going on, or your mind may quiet a little or feel a little more settled. But you start to find that at some point you are in the sitting generally. You're not so concerned about how long it is or about other things that were occurring when you first sat down. And so at that point you may find that you're more capable of perhaps exploring a bit of what's going on in your experience. You may find some things are not grabbing you as much. You're not holding on to certain thoughts and feelings as you were when you began the sitting. You might find that you're actually able to get very concentrated on certain aspects of your experience.
So tell us about leading into and really what they're about, the explorative, the non-taking up, and the connected processes.
Okay. Well, the basic, I would say, principle around recollective awareness is that by being receptive to your experience and starting out that way, you'll find that things come up that are of interest, that you start to think about or contemplate, or feelings that you go into in more depth. And so there's a way that you just start to explore your experience instead of trying to just notice what's happening or move through things. You find that you're actually kind of interested in what's going on. And the type of interviews with teachers, and if students send me journals, one of the other teachers' journals, and we have a conversation about it, part of how we're talking about people's sittings is to look at what's going on that you're not normally aware of, and to start to become interested in it. So our whole process is to just get more exploration going, get more, to have meditation not just be something that you do and get through and that you get certain results, but something that really contains quite a bit of learning and kind of like fresh perspectives and things that are arising for you through being interested and engaged. So an explorative process for some people might look like they're just thinking about the meditation instructions, or having a dialogue with the teacher about something, or about their experience, or talking to somebody in their mind about certain insights. But actually you may find when that's going on, it's not just a kind of idle, internal monologue or dialogue. You're really exploring what's happening to you. And that's one thing around meditation practice, is sometimes we don't recognize periods where we're actually looking into our experience. We, because they're happening in a way that's, how do you say it? It's just like, it's too ordinary. It's just talking to somebody else about what's going on.
Well, it's a very good point that it's not just about that zone one may hit on the cushion, but there are processes that are very active and, in this case, as we're discussing, explorative and maybe actually very verbal in discussions with someone else that still is part of the meditative process.
Right. Well, discussion with someone else, like discussion with a teacher or other students, or hearing other students' sittings, for example, and wondering about that person's experiences. All of that may generate more exploration in somebody. And that looking at it as explorative process, something more internal. Part of how you say the advantage of looking into your emotions and thoughts and things about yourself in meditation as opposed to psychotherapy is you don't have to create a dialogue with another person and have that other person respond to you and be interrupted in your inner process. In meditation, it's uninterrupted. And so you're having a dialogue with somebody perhaps while you're going through a certain feeling or memory, and find that you're seeing something about it that you wouldn't be able to otherwise. So part of this whole approach around allowing thinking is also a way in which we may develop our thinking within meditation.
So let's go into the non-taking up process.
That's actually one of the harder ones to really talk about, because I think many people brought into Vipassana meditation are given pretty strong teachings about letting go and not clinging, and about being equanimous, not reacting to experience. And many of the practices people learn, I think, actually do accomplish that for a while. I mean, they produce states of mind where you might actually be very, authentically less reactive to things and have less clinging and aversion. But what I'm trying to get at in the process is that we still need to go further than just the notion of not clinging to a place of not building, not kind of taking up an experience and building a lot of stories about it, a lot of narratives in the sense of who I am because of this experience, or what this experience means. And so what I'm looking at is that in a more explorative process, you start to see how you build a sense of self and a stories about yourself. And a non-taking up process, you might find that you actually don't take those up so much, that you've seen through them a bit. And so in certain situations where how do you say, you usually take up a notion of yourself as being, how do you say, maybe very clever, you might find that you don't so much. You don't build upon that. You can be other ways. You can have much more freedom. And so I don't go into that as much in the book, but a non-taking process is not something that I see as like an optimal state or an enlightened state or anything like that. I see it as a kind of necessary development for us to actually move towards greater freedom in our lives.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then I think finishing up tonight with the connected process, and possibly a couple of words on samadhi or jhana, because I know that's something you mentioned, that the connected process generally occurs during those kinds of states.
Yes, and what I mean by connected here is a process where you feel some kind of unification or oneness, perhaps at times, or you feel connected to something that you see is always there. And this is a quality of some of the deep tranquil states people go into, is they may feel that mind is so quiet, it's so spacious and empty that has always been there, and that all you've needed to do is connect with it. And so a connected process actually often has a feel to it of it's not about process, it's not about something dynamic. It's about something that's still and present, and that you're it's always there. And so those kinds of views will enter in to people's connected experiences. And a connected process is, I think, one of the main objectives for many types of meditation practice. It's not really stated so much in Vipassana, because Vipassana is, traditionally looking at experience as dynamic and changing, rather than, stable and, transcendent. And so in that case, the whole notion of jhana, of absorption, really does, for many people, go in the direction of trying to find something that's permanent, that always exists, a state of mind that is unperturbed and stable and calm and patient and clear. And so those states may arise within meditation, and they may last for a few seconds or a few minutes, but then they fade. You move on to something else, and what happens with people is they don't realize when they move on to another state of mind that actually that state that they thought was permanent and stable is gone. So how could it be that?
Yeah, impermanence is the key, and that we see that even in these states that we may really find quite pleasant and helpful, but they're also very transitory.
Yeah, they're all transitory. And so you might instead look at, how do they affect my way of thinking afterwards? How do they culture my mind, in a certain way, or lean it in a certain direction?
Well, the book we've been speaking about is Unlearning Meditation. Jason, your website, again, I want to read it for people who are listening, is www.skillfulmeditation.org. Jason, anything else you'd like to add?
Things are better stated in the book, probably, than in this interview, and in some of my talks. And that I've worked with training teachers for a long time, and I've worked on teaching this approach. And like any approach to meditation, I think the way to get a sense of how it works and if it's going to help you is to contact a teacher and just try it out.
Do, and take a look at the website as well, because it does list where you will be doing retreats. You do retreats in the United States and Australia, two main places where you go.
Yes.
And you can be contacted there. And I do recommend the book very highly, because just some of the concepts brought into my own practice led to territories I hadn't been in before. And that really is quite freeing and has applications to off the cushion as well. So, Jason, thank you very much for being here.
You're welcome, Ted. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to learn more about something you've heard in today's podcast, please come visit the companion website at www.thesecularbuddhist.com, and you'll find an entire web page devoted to this and every episode. There are also links to discussions about today's topic on the Secular Buddhist Facebook fan page. The music for the Secular Buddhist is used by permission from John Kaizan Neptune's CD, Steps in Time. Additional music is provided courtesy of Monty Levinson of Taihei Shakuhachi and Rodrigo Rodriguez. Their websites are linked on the Secular Buddhist on the About Music page. Until next time, remember, every moment you have a choice. Make it the best you can. See you next time on The Secular Buddhist.